again. In this screencast, I'm going to take you through a few readers that were submitted in my class over the past several years, just to give you an idea of what kind of topics are possible and what your final result should look like. Okay? Remember, this is an example of the final draft, not the proposal. For the proposal, you can kind of use as a model the proposals we did in the fall. But for here, I'd like to concentrate on the final result, okay? We notice up here, this is page 1 of 18 is his title page. So, but as we go through it, you'll realize, even though this thing is 18 pages long, the student didn't write all 18 pages of that because he's collecting material from other sources. So as we go through this, I want to give you guys a sense for what material is yours that you're responsible for writing, and what material are you responsible for copying and pasting from others, okay? And you're not plagiarizing here, guys, because you're going to give credit to whoever wrote these things, all right? So this was one done by a young man who I believe is now an astrophysics major, and he was always just super interested in anything referencing the sun, the moon, the stars, anything like that in literature. So here he gives his introduction. This is the part that the student wrote, okay? This is his overall intro that covers and explains what he's doing in this project, what kinds of sources he's consulting, what things he hopes to include. Here he's telling us where these selections come from. He's telling us what these selections focus on. And then in his last paragraph here, he tells us a little bit about what his overall thesis is for the importance of cosmological imagination in literature and philosophy. Okay, so that's his intro here. And, right, it's just about a page, yeah, it's almost 2 pages long, double spaced. That's what he wrote, okay? Now look, here comes his first selection, but this is also the student's own writing. This is his short introduction to the selection. He's chosen an Epic of Gilgamesh. I love this formatting here where he gives us the title in italics. That beautiful horizontal line really tells us clearly that the introduction is over and we're moving on to a new section. Gives us a date of publication, well, not really publication, but a date. And then he gives us a short introduction. Again, this was written by the student, okay? And he's explaining what is important about the Epic of Gilgamesh, why it's included in here, and what he wants students to get from this selection, okay? And now he gives us the selection itself. This is all stuff that he copied and pasted, okay? And remember, I told you guys before that I would Command F. Let me just search for the, right? Because it appears basically everywhere. These are all his thes. I probably should have picked a word that was not quite so darn common. But notice what's happening. What this is telling me is that every one of his typed selections here is searchable. See, this is what I wanted to check. That in the passage he copied and pasted from the internet, which is what I want you to do. I do not want you typing this stuff up on your own. That's what we would have had to done when I was a student in the 90s. That's not what you should be doing now. You should be copying and pasting, okay? But this means that his copying and pasting of the Epic of Gilgamesh worked because it's searchable. If it hadn't worked, it would have been just a facsimile image and it would have been unsearchable. All right, so there I've got that. Now again, that was all written, that was not written by the student, right? This is all the stuff he selected. Now again, that horizontal line gets used as a nice way to indicate one part of the reader is over, we're moving on to the next. Now again, here is an introduction. This is written by the student, and it's telling us about the true story written by the philosopher Lucian, and written in 150 AD, excuse me. And then down here, when he gives us the label paragraphs what is that? He kind of wrote the Roman numeral incorrectly. That should be 8 and 9. But here is the whole selection. So you notice this is one of his longest selections, and it spans about 2 pages. Well, let's see. Sorry. Yeah, about 1.5 pages, almost 2 pages. That's about the longest you want your selections to be. You don't want them to go on multiple pages like that necessarily. Okay? And now you guys are starting to get the pattern, right? This editor, this student who edited this collection has made some really clear stylistic cues. The horizontal lines tell me that a new selection is coming. The title and author in the upper left tell me what selection is being introduced. The date tells me when it was produced. Then I get my short double-spaced introduction. And then I notice that he's using different spacing for his actual selections, right? This looks like 1.15, where his intros are double, which is what his big intro was in the beginning, okay? So you'll notice this guy's is very text-heavy, but now he is introducing to us an engraving, okay? Here's his introduction about the engraving. And then he produces a very nice image of the engraving. This is one beautiful thing about doing these readers as PDF, guys, is your image quality online on a computer is going to be so much better than if we printed this out. I guarantee you, if you print this out on an inkjet, it's not going to look this good. Now we get to another selection. I think by now you guys are getting the pattern. This is how it works. We have a short intro written by the student, and then the selections that are written by the other authors. Okay. Now he's using a deep space telescope from Hubble, which is kind of an awesome image. Again, I'm sure if you just printed that out on your LaserJet printer, it would look like junk. But here on a high-def screen, it looks pretty good. And then we get to the end, and we have his work cited. Okay? You notice for the introductions and the overall introduction, he didn't have any parenthetical citations in there. And I don't really think you need to include any, because you're not doing quotes. You're basically just kind of explaining what you're doing in the paper. Okay? So, 18 pages. If you add it up, the author of this, the student who wrote it, wrote the introduction, which was 2 pages, and he wrote 8 short introductions to each of the selections, so 8 short paragraphs. So I think if you added all this up, the student probably wrote somewhere between like maybe 3 to 5 pages total, but it comes out to be 18 because of the selections he's using, okay, from other authors. So don't be intimidated by the fact that it's 15 or 18 pages long. You're not writing all 15 or 18 pages. You're just writing the introductory parts, okay? Let me walk through quickly one other one that I thought was very interesting. This one is on madness and mental illness in literature. And here's the student's introduction. He gives us this really nice intro. Again, it's just about 2 pages, okay? And he tells us what why he's interested in this, how he selected the works, okay? And he also tells us something very interesting. He says, I selected a diversity of sources from various time periods in the English language canon to showcase broad shifts in literary viewpoints, okay? He also included different forms. He has drama, autobiographical novels, memoir, and a novel. And so he basically wants to represent madness in literature through time, over time, and in different genres. Very interesting, okay? He goes on here to talk about how he decided what to include and what not to include. And then he explains overall what are the 6 works that he selected. Remember, you had a minimum of 6, maximum of 8, okay? And of your minimum 6, minimum 5 of those have to be text, which means you're allowed up to 3 non-textual sources. Okay? All right. So this student was really interested in doing mental illness and mental instability because of the role of mental illness in Hamlet. So he's actually using one source from the class. And I think it's good to use 1 or 2 sources from the class, guys. I don't think that's a bad thing. Certainly it's not a requirement. Where I would be cautious is if all 6 or 7 or 8 of your sources are from class. That tells me that basically you just are giving a condensed version of my class, because you're basically just taking all my readings. So go beyond my readings. Go beyond what you had to do for my class and do stuff that you're interested in and that you maybe wish we had read in my class or in another class. Okay? So here's one. He's given us his short introduction to Hamlet. Remember, these are the student's own words. He brings in a nice image here. I always like, this was a student who did a newspaper layout. And so this was a student who was really well versed in how to bring images into text. And it's a nice touch. I think it works well. It makes it visually appealing. And you'll see as we go on, he develops a pattern where he always uses an image after his introduction and before the selection. And so the selection here is about Hamlet's decision to play mad, and so he gives us that speech here. Okay, we move on to another selection. This is from Virginia Woolf, an extraordinary modernist novel called Mrs. Dalloway. Here again is the student's introduction. All right. Again, he provides us with a common pattern. Notice these patterns make it easier on your reader to know what's going on. After his introductions, he gives me an image of the text, or the cover of the book, excuse me, and then he gives me the passage. Okay? Again, the passage is less than a page. You'll also notice, similar to the previous student, and I think this works, guys, I would try to make sure there's some way to distinguish your writing in the introductions from the writing of the other authors. Okay? And these guys chose to do it not by changing fonts, which I think is problematic, but by changing spacing. My preferred way to do it, honestly, is just to use horizontal lines to separate, passages from each other and the intros of the passage from the passage itself. But you can play around with it. Different design cues will work. So there's a lot of creative variability here. Okay? Again, now you're starting to get the sense for how these are packaged. Again, we have the title and author. Notice how the font there is big. That's his indication to me that a new selection is coming. This is the part written by the student himself. Again, he gives us the copy of the front cover, and then now he gives us the short selection. All right? I'm going to scroll through to the end here because we are getting, you get the scene, you get the idea. Okay? And then we're at the Works Cited page, okay? So we had 16 pages total here. The author, the student, wrote, I would say, he wrote a 2-page introduction plus 6 different short intros. So he probably wrote a total of about 4 of these 16 pages, maybe 4 to 5 pages, okay? So basically, and actually, both of these ones I showed you happen to be done by a single student each, but you're, of course, more than welcome to do these with partners. But I just want to suggest, that these are some of the different possibilities you can use. These two have focused on a particular motif in literature, either madness or celestial bodies as they appear in literature. The one about celestial bodies, also focused on mythological texts in addition to literary texts. But again, this doesn't have to be literary. You're allowed to do something purely nonfiction. I've had excellent projects that look at examples of journalism, activist literature, anti-war literature, literature advocating for gay rights, women's rights, anti-nuclear weapons. I mean, anything you can think of that is journalistic could be done here as well. So just because this class is a literature class doesn't mean this assignment has to be all literary. All of your sources could be nonfiction if you want. They could all be literary if you want. You could have half and half. You could have half literary, half nonfiction. You could have some poetry, some nonfiction. You could include movie clips. Anything is possible. All right? So that's my description of these two examples. I hope this has been helpful to you. And once we have had a chance to watch these, we will then have a chance to talk about them in class. And I can see what you guys are thinking about, what your questions are, and I can hope to address those for you. Okay? So that is the final screencast on the course reader project. This one looked at examples of readers. Thanks for your attention, and I am signing out.